Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Thank you so much for supporting. You guys seem to be enjoying it, so we're going to keep it going. Real quick before the episode, if you would subscribe just so you're tuned in whenever we release a new episode. We're going to be doing it at least once a week. So if you just got engaged with the channel here, we'd really appreciate that. But with that being said, we'll just get into it. An interesting week of NBA games. We thought the season was kind of maybe cooling off or we're kind of getting into the middle, but there's still a lot of exciting stuff happening and some interesting games.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know we talked about the James Harden trade last time we talked. Since then, we've had a couple good Nets games to follow up on. The first one, they beat the Bucks, and that was a pretty big game, I think, because those are the two top teams in the East, at least on paper. So I think we'll see. It'll be interesting to watch those teams going forward, especially now with Kyrie back in the fold. They did lose a crazy game against the Cavs. I know me and you talked a little bit offline. You want to talk about that game a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that was crazy. Colin Sexton. I don't know what else to say besides that. No, we're super skipping ahead, but that's all right. We're having, fun conversation here. Just from a card perspective, really quickly. It's interesting because to provide the counterpoint, I like to think I have self-aware maybe is not the word, but we've written off kind of guys, not written off, but maybe wow, I'm not explaining this well at all, but you know what I'm trying to say about warn people against investing in guys like Colin Sexton, maybe some of these people who we thought maybe their cars are going to go by the wayside. They're kind of going to be what's shiny and new. People are going to be looking at other people, but he proved us wrong, maybe at least for now. Colin Sexton looking like a star in the NBA.
Yeah, Sexton went crazy. I think he scored the last 20 points for the Cavs and then was just clutch. Like he was going all out. He tied the game up, sent it to overtime, and then came back and was hitting crazy threes. And I think it went to double overtime. What's crazy to me is he's not that tall,
Mhm.
not that physically imposing, not an elite shooter, but still he somehow gets it done. I was talking with a friend last night and he was like, he's finally figured out the NBA. Like, if you watch old Colin Sexton AAU highlights, obviously he was balling out his whole life. And then his first year in the league was he had some ups and downs, but he was balling the second half of that season. I think it's definitely carried over. He's almost averaging 30 points per game and doing it pretty efficiently. So definitely exciting for Cavs fan. I think they finally found a guy to build around and it'll be fun to watch him.
Yeah, I think he's definitely a very talented player. The one thing I will say though, and I think people know, but maybe they don't know how important it is just opportunity. And I'm not going to be super disrespectful on this podcast and compare Colin Sexton to a G leaguer, but you see sometimes these G leaguers at the end of the season come up and they're playing against full NBA rosters and they drop 30 just because the ball's in their hands. I always talk about I'm super biased. I'm a big fan of Jordan Clarkson. When he had the opportunity to get shots up, he's a 30 per night type of guy. But there's a difference between showing it when he's on, I guess the Cavs have looked all right, but not on a great team. At the very least, a team where he has a lot of opportunity to shoot and being that guy on a winning team. But I mean, with that, even to just have Colin Sexton in that kind of conversation, I guess speaks to the type of player he is, though.
Yeah, and I think one last thing, like if you're looking at his prices, his silver tens are pretty much up to $1,000.
Oh, wow.
They were closer to 700, 800 in the beginning of the year, which is already pretty expensive, but it's kind of in that like De'Aaron Fox price range. Those are two guys that are young, in their second and third year, and aren't on winning teams. And I think it remains to be seen whether or not they could be the best player on a championship team, like you were saying. Not everything has to be about winning championships, and maybe that's my own bias coming out, but at least when I'm collecting, I definitely look at long-term potential and like, can these guys go down as all-timers? That's just my personal preference though. So I try to not let that cloud my judgment because I know there's a lot of people that invest in Colin Sexton because they really like him, part of their personal collection, and have made money flipping him. I know his national treasures, some of his stuff, doubled from a year ago or tripled. So there's definitely money to be made in these guys that aren't necessarily going to go down as Hall of Famers.
Yeah, 100%. And I've said that from the beginning. In these little pockets, in these first couple years, there's a ton of opportunity to make profit. But I will say it's not just you, it's not just your personal preference. I'm going to keep reminding people this. It takes a lot to maintain hobby relevance. So once these guys like Colin Sexton, he's been in the league a couple years and he's starting to show it. This is what he needs to do. But people actually do need to see a lot from you to convince them basically at this point, can you lead a winning team? Not even necessarily a championship team, but it's a pretty big jump to leading a winning team who's making noise in the playoffs. But that's enough. We won't turn it into the Colin Sexton podcast. The Nets, I'm surprised to see them looking this good. I mean, I know they, struggled in that game, but I'm surprised to see them playing so well this early. It looks like James Harden and Kevin Durant just right to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think James Harden and Kevin Durant will lead you to like a top three, 2 to 3 offense off the bat. It doesn't really matter who you surround them with. I mean, right now they have Joe Harris, which is nice. Jeff Green was playing a lot of minutes. Um, DeAndre Jordan, he's definitely on the lower half of starting centers, in my opinion. And I don't even know if he's going to be like playing too much for the playoffs. Even last year, even last game they just played, he was sitting out all of like pretty much the second half of the fourth quarter and then a bunch in the overtime. So I think they do have questions around those two guys. Obviously, Kyrie came back, and Durant put up 38. Kyrie has 37, and Harden has a triple double. So all three of those guys filled it up, seemingly played well, but they were also hemorrhaging points. They were giving up. I watched the whole game, and every single possession it seemed like the Cavs were getting an open three, open dunk, open layup, and then they finally, the Nets finally turned it up in the fourth quarter. But Colin Sexton, they gave the Cavs enough confidence to get it done. So I think it's the same questions we had a week ago. The conversation hasn't changed that much, but it was definitely interesting to see them beat the Bucks, and then they might have close games with a lot of teams because they really cannot guard anybody, which is definitely going to be that's their big piece, right? Do you think that's their next step?
Yeah, it's defense. I mean, losing Jared Allen, that hurts a lot already. I think he's maybe not underrated because people know how good of a rim protector he is, and he's been talked about a lot, but that's a big difference when you're talking about a championship team. Losing a piece like him, losing some of their depth, that's gonna hurt them. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's still James Harden and Kevin Durant. That's a good thing to roll with.
And Kyrie. I mean, it remains to be seen whether or not
Yeah.
the three of them can work it out, but definitely will be a fun team to watch. They're gonna have to go up against Embiid and Giannis and these bigger guys. So that's where Jared Allen's perfect. He's kind of that missing piece. But in today's NBA, you kind of have to. There's no perfect team. The Warriors were kind of a perfect team for a second there, and it's like it lasts 2-3 years, and then the next window for the next teams. The Lakers last year even weren't a shoo-in. They weren't even the favorite. I think the Clippers were ahead of them. There's some other teams. So now it's not going to be perfect teams that are winning titles. It's going to be teams that, they have enough offensive firepower where if they're even like a top 10 or top 8 defense, they can get it done. So I think that'll definitely be fun to watch. But, we were talking about Colin Sexton, and I'll kind of take that to our next point. I know we were talking about a couple questions we got. One of them was talking about young players that maybe have the potential to get in the All-Star this game. Are there anyone else, in that same category that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, Colin Sexton with that performance, with how he's been playing, the numbers he's been putting up, definitely puts himself in that conversation. Um, this is kind of one right at the forefront, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been playing well as of late. He's going to continue to get that opportunity. He's going to continue to put up numbers. Some sleeper guys like Julius Randle. I mean, it sounds kind of weird to hear that, but the way he's been playing, argument could be made for Christian Wood at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, first time all-stars, obviously, all-stars, maybe even Julius Randle shouldn't be in that conversation in terms of the hobby. You know what I mean? If you're looking
Yeah.
to, I'm not sure I'd recommend anyone going all in on Julius Randle, but those are the names that come to mind for me immediately. What about you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that Christian Wood story is super, super fun to see him succeeding. He's kind of like a Anthony Davis light. He could get it done. He's skinny, but he still blocks shots. He's a presence around the rim, and he can shoot. So he's definitely a good building piece, I think, for the Rockets, and they look at him like that. It's weird that the Pistons just let him go, but Jeremy Grant is another player. I have to tell you, I think I was wrong on him as getting paid what he's getting paid and as the lead guy on the team. He's scoring 25 and a half points per game, getting 6 boards, and is shooting 39% from three, which is pretty insane because you look at his usage last year with Denver. He was kind of an up and comer wing. We didn't know whether he could handle a bigger workload, but the Pistons believed in him. And granted, it's the same thing you're saying. The Pistons aren't a winning team, but it's definitely not because of Jeremy Grant. He's doing his job. So I think if they can get a couple more pieces, maybe he is a building block going forward.
Yeah, I mean the Pistons. Just a quick interjection. Poor Blake Griffin, man. I saw this clip.
Washed.
He does not look good.
Washed.
And also, like, I saw this clip on Reddit of the Heat announcer, and he just kept being like, every time Blake Griffin caught the ball and he was trying to post up Duncan Robinson and he couldn't do it, the Heat announcer, wow, Blake Griffin just not what he used to be. Got a three up there, but that's his only shot of the game so far, just from 3-point range. And it kind of made me
Yep.
sad, man. That's tough. I mean, obviously he dealt with a lot of injury, but
Well, it happened like this though, because he was
yeah.
dealing with injury. Then he came back and started shooting threes. Was still like an elite creator, scorer. He was still a monster. He wasn't as good of an athlete. And then, after this last surgery, it looks like he's really fallen off a cliff, which is sad. Especially if you remember those Clipper days, he was
Lob
probably
City.
the most dominant force in the NBA, and kind of like Zion or any other young player that just is almost unstoppable when he gets in the paint.
Yeah.
So
I,
it's
I did
definitely
I did I did think of Zion when we were watching Blake and people were talking about Lob City, and we won't even get into that because that's literally not even a whole podcast. That's a whole essay on Zion, his potential and injuries and all that stuff. But I'll keep it with the young all-stars for a minute. I think Jeremy Grant, opportunity guy, Julius Randle, even Christian Wood to an extent from a hobby perspective. I don't think anyone's really looking to invest in them really. But
yeah.
SGA would definitely be one. Is there any other players who you think a first All Star appearance could
Yeah.
mean big things for their
Jay,
prices?
Jalen Brown wasn't an all-star, right? I think it
No,
was between him and
I don't
Tatum
think,
last year for that
yeah, I don't think he's been an
final
All Star
spot.
yet.
Bradley Beal didn't get it either, I don't think. So Jalen Brown obviously would be a clear name on a winning team. The Celtics have kind of stayed afloat without Tatum, and that's because of Jalen Brown. He's averaging 26 points, 6 boards, 4 assists. Finally starting to make plays for other teammates of his, and he's the defense. He's always going to be bringing it. So he's a two-way wing that I think really put it all together. The shooting, the playmaking, stuff they didn't have in his package a couple of years ago. I think Celtics fans are really excited about him and Tatum. And if the Celtics are a winning team, given the time that Tatum's missed and how well Brown has played, he's got to be in that All-Star game. I think ahead of the names that we've talked about. Ahead of the Jeremy Grants and Julius Randles. I think he will get it. So he'd be one guy for sure. And that's kind of from a hobby standpoint. He was really underpriced for a long time. He was like, a quarter or 20% of the price of someone like Tatum, who, if you look at their career numbers, I think Tatum's done it in big games, and he kind of gets the fourth quarter highlights that people are excited about. And he came in, he was super young. Tatum has kind of always been, he had a great rookie year. Jalen Brown's trajectory was a little more muddled early on. He wasn't shooting the ball that well, averaged like 6 points as a rookie, I think, or something like that. But I think finally the prices of Brown are catching up to Tatum. And I think as they should. I'm not saying they should be priced the same, but it definitely should be closer than 1/5 or a quarter.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Jalen Brown playing really well. Of watching the games, the biggest thing is before you kind of live with the threes, maybe not live, you're never leaving them open, but he's in sharpshooter territory with how he's been shooting this season. That's really opened up his game. Obviously, if you have to choose, you still go with Tatum, but I think they should be in that same conversation. And I think Jalen Brown All-Star appearance, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander All-Star appearance, you could see them kind of solidified and move into maybe that realm of prices and conversation. We don't have
Yeah.
any hobby news this week, so I apologize. We're going to kind of be jumping around, but it is going to be hobby centric. I kind of want to go back to Harden a little bit. His price is going up a ton, putting himself in a winning situation. I think we've talked about the Nets and Harden, and everyone knows the kind of situation he's in. But what's really interesting to me is you have some Harden in your collection. We know some other people who had it. I really think this idea, especially with how the NBA is now, of just investing in talented guys, they will find themselves in good situations eventually. It's the same kind of thing. And maybe the jury's more out on Karl Anthony Towns than James Harden. But when I think about Towns, when I think about Booker, when I think about what happened with Anthony Davis, I just feel like with the way the league is now, these guys just will end up in a championship situation eventually.
Yeah. And the hobby's gotten so hot, the prices are at all-time high that even players like Bradley Beal and Towns, their prices have risen a ton in the last 2, 3 years. In large part because of the market, but also because, like what you're saying, if you believe in a player well enough, if you would have held Anthony Davis for 4 or 5 years, you're 10x your money, because he's playing with LeBron. He already won a championship. He definitely has a chance to be a Finals MVP. So I think believing in a player's talent is becoming more important than just buying someone who's in a winning situation, which I think is actually good. And, Harden hasn't won a title, and that was kind of the biggest knock on him, in addition to like he was foul hunting, all these other things people don't like. But if you look at his career numbers, he's going to go down as probably the third or fourth best shooting guard ever, with a chance at, getting to the second or third. I don't think he's going to, leap Dwayne Wade, but you never know what happens in the next 3-4 years. Dwayne Wade's last half of his career was really bad. And Harden is still playing at an elite level. So I think he's been undervalued for so long. There's no reason. We talked about this last time, even before we went to Brooklyn. I was kind of always saying I really like James Harden, not as a player, but from a buying perspective, because you're buying someone who already has all these things in his legacy. You're not projecting to the future. He already has 2 or 3 scoring titles. He already has an MVP. He was top 3 in MVP voting for 5 years. That's elite. That's something that, Sexton and Trae Young, these young guys may never sniff. If they maximize their situation, then they'll get there. But for someone like Harden, if you're buying him and he's cheaper than some of these young, talented guys, I think it's a no-brainer investment. I think it was only a matter of time before we saw his prices rise.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree with it. I think I talk a lot about prospecting, and that's a lot of the place where people like to kind of gamble in a sense. I've said it before, and I think we're seeing it more and more. Gamble on these talented players getting into a good situation. I think that's honestly the smarter way to do it, or at least an alternative. But speaking of also Nets prices, KD's prices going up, I think because obviously Harden and Kyrie is a big part of it, but a even bigger part of it is I think this movement that's happening, even just looking at YouTube content, is everyone is hammering home, invest in the GOATs,
Yeah.
fractional ownership, all this stuff. Like this is the GOATs are heating up. I don't know how to say it besides that. What do you think about that? Is the hobby changing? Is there going to be this huge gap? People have said, the average person is not going to be able to afford LeBron James rookie cards, and that's just how it's going to be. What do you think about all that's been happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also players or people coming of age, like, me and you are 24 now, 25. We start to have more capital and we want to invest in the players we grew up watching. Someone brought that point up, and I think, Steph Curry is going to be a part of our lives. Like, we grew up watching that guy play. I think having a really nice rookie card of his, especially for investors that are doing it from a collection standpoint and actually just like the cards. I think having a Steph card, like I would put a Steph card in my room. I'd get a nice case for it and put it up somewhere. I think it's awesome. So I think it's partly, people coming of age, having more money to play with, and investing in players that they watched growing up. And then I also think it is just the market correcting itself. I think it's people looking at the prices, comparing these young guys to older guys, and going with the safer bets. And I think, Durant, like I said, the hate for Durant had gotten so strong that it totally threw off his prices. Like I was saying, there's no reason why he should be, one half or one third Steph's value like it was a year ago. It's got to be closer to, 50-50 neck and neck, which is what it's getting to now. So I think, like you said, I mean, the fractional ownership piece too. Granted, as more money comes in, these cards that are numbered out of 99, or there's 500 of them, and there's only 50 in PSA 10s. Those cards they're going to continue to go up, as everything else goes up.
Yeah. I mean, I think also the Gary V effect. And it's interesting because I actually like Gary V. Like I'll say that, hey, that's on record. Unfortunately, we have that on camera now. But he was saying like, oh, I'm people criticize me for manipulating the market, so I'm just kind of gonna blur my pictures and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. That's probably good to do. And then he tweets out, buy LeBron James, Topps Chrome, literally buy. Like he's like, buy. He was telling people to do that, which is fine. I don't necessarily feel too strongly about whatever he does. He can do, but it's just interesting. I feel like that at least had to play a little bit of a part in it.
Totally. Stuff goes up overnight. That even happened with the Kevin Durant, PSA 10 refractors.
Yeah.
That stuff kind of popped overnight. And I think you have to look and see if it maintains in 6 months. Cause like people were saying that the LeBron James stuff was a bubble when it was at 15 grand. And now his base PSA 10s are up to like 25, I think, or even more. So it's like the Bitcoin thing. There's always going to be the doubters and people saying prices are ran up, and there definitely is market manipulation going on. But if you look at the curve over time, and it's constantly doing this with the dips here and there, there's a reason for it. And I think there's enough people that are bullish on this market. And obviously, LeBron is going to, I think he's going to go down as the best player ever. I've always thought that. I've never seen someone better than him. He's done it in an era where it's harder and harder to win championships. So I think people are starting to realize that, or continuing to realize that. And as the market goes up, they're going to want to buy. And it's pretty awesome to say I own a LeBron rookie card, especially as
rookie auto, man. Don't be so humble.
Yeah, well, that one too. That one's nice. I
just,
can't sell that.
Yeah, you shouldn't. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. Kevin Durant, LeBron James, even James Harden to an extent, the numbers and the accomplishments will play out over time. But I also think the last thing on this is, I talk about it a lot, but don't fight the hype. Don't just sit here like, oh, I hate Gary Vee, I hate ESPN or Instagram or any of this stuff. It's almost as important as anything to have your finger on the pulse of what's happening just in the basketball as a whole. Know who's being posted on YouTube.
Yeah.
Is Trae Young really exciting people? Like, this is if Trae Young got a movie deal, I don't know, it's a really random thing, but that stuff is important and it's going to play a part in their prices. So just understand it at the very least, if not be aware of it and know these type of things are happening.
And you can capitalize on that. I think
exactly.
People doing that, you saying like know the pulse of the NBA and media coverage, it's relevant because that's where the money is. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are kind of like sheep when they invest. They just listen to Gary Vee and they immediately buy his cards. And I don't think that's the route to go either. But I think, like you said, if you know what's happening, you can use it to your advantage to pick up cards that you like of players that you like that aren't really being talked about. That's kind of how I've done it.
Exactly. And I've said, even for, people who are like, oh, all these sheep, all these people investing in these dumb young guys, and they're like, oh, it's so easy to see. Well, it is kind of easy to see, you're right, but use it to your advantage then. If you want to if the Zion hype is so stupid or the LaMelo hype is so stupid, take your profit and put it into Dirk Nowitzki if that's who you really like at the end of the day. But okay, that was what's been going on kind of all over the place. We'll get into the Q&A. The first one is from Christian Lopez. Would you invest in LaMelo, seeing his stats are good right now?
Yeah, I don't know the rebounding percentage. Like, I probably should look into that. But if you look at his numbers, it's pretty absurd. He'll have games with 22 minutes and 14 rebounds. So I think how well-rounded his offensive game is, coupled with the fact that he's, above average rebounder, great playmaker. I listened to a couple different podcasts that said it was consensus that LaMelo's passing was the most important, or at least highest upside skill set in that draft as a whole. So I think if you look at the full package and you look at he's like 19 years old, super fun, box office, entertaining. He's kind of got like that same Trae Young, exciting highlight reel plays, and he's a ball brother, right? I mean, we know they're like the Kardashians at this point. They're super relevant in our culture for whatever reason. So I think he's going to be really expensive. He's kind of like got that same Zion upside downside. I think he's going to be super expensive, but you can double and triple your money pretty quickly if he really pops in the next year or two. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit it on the head what I was thinking. He's expensive, but at the same time, especially with how the hobby is right now, these young guys, especially when they're as talented as LaMelo, they're always going to be expensive. Like, it's not going to be like, oh, they're always undervalued. Like, oh, Giannis. You're not just going to be able to find a Giannis. I think if you completely write off these top picks because they're so expensive when they come out, you're going to miss out on opportunity.
Yeah.
Because
totally.
the hobby's changed. That's a big part. But even, I'm sure you can even speak, at the time, people were like, oh, Luka is overpriced. There's so much hype. But
he's tripled since.
Yeah, if you had bought Luka at any point over the past 2 years, you'd be in a really good position. And an argument could have been made, he's been overpriced this whole time, but it's still worked out for you.
Yeah, and it's like the same thing as Tesla. It's like there's so many people always doubting these blue chip stocks or blue chip players, and for good reason. Like, a lot of times they haven't seen the production and they want to wait till they see the production in order for the prices to rise. But a lot of it's already baked in. And then a lot of it is people just love Luka. Like, he's going to be the next LeBron, in my opinion, in terms of impact, international appeal. And he's 21. He's averaging 30, 10, and 10, and it's an off year. So that his upside is top 5 player ever. that is his upside. We just have to be honest about that. If he picks up a couple MVPs and a couple rings early on, the sky's the limit. But the downside is there, and that's why you have all the people kind of doubting him. And a lot of times it's people just bummed out they missed on investing in him early on. I know, and that's just kind of their own bitterness coming out. So I try to stay away from like saying, "Oh, that he's going to go down in prices," because I don't know. And I think anyone who's that talented and that good can continue to go up over time. There is going to be he is going to hit a cap at some point, especially if he gets bounced in the first round for a couple years in a row or something, which could happen to the Mavericks. But
Mhm.
until that happens, I'm not going to be telling anyone, steer clear or he's too expensive. Or I'll tell them that's my opinion, but there's going to be people making money on these guys.
Yeah. I think with LaMelo and Wiseman, it would just be a mistake to completely write them off and just say, "Oh, they're too expensive, not gonna do it." I think it's like with anything, they'll be I mean, just take, for example, if you buy them on the very first day their cards come out, that's gonna be too expensive. But I still think there'll be opportunities, and even just as a selfish Warriors fan, I'm at least gonna have to find a way to get some Wiseman, even if he is gonna be very expensive.
Yeah, I
But
mean that's part of the thing. Like we should be buying stuff that we like, and
mhm,
that's how I've found it. I have a hard time parting with some of these cards. Like I need to sell some cards. Like just bought a place and I need to do renovations and I need to come up with money, but I'm having a really hard time parting from some of these cards because I know I won't ever be able to get them back. And even if I make a good percentage on them, it still hurts because I really like these players that I'm buying and picking up and I believe in them. So that's how it should be, frankly. I think if you're not willing to part with the cards, you're doing something right.
yeah, definitely. At the end of the day, I always say here to make money, but not here to make money, but there's you want to make money would be a rather thing, but you have to have fun, man. I can't some of these people are like, oh, I'm only just for instance, like ComC flipping and even Star Stock to an extent, which I really enjoy and I think it's great. It's like I just like having the cards in my hands. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's a different kind of enjoyment. It's like I'm not just for me, I'm not gonna flip baseball on ComC. I'm just not gonna do it because it wouldn't
Yeah.
be fun, even though I'm sure there's some money to be made.
Yeah.
But speaking of opportunities, last Q&A question from Vito Log. I'm actually looking to buy an RPA card for a good price, but after checking, the back card is chipped. It's very small. You can hardly see it. Does that affect the value of the card? I was told it's common with thick cards. What's your advice? I'm kind of going to maybe sum this up into a question. What do you think about buying raw cards or RPAs or basically just buying these things that are outside of like I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. What do
Yeah.
you think about buying something
I
like
mean, I
that?
would say anything like prior to 2016, 2017, don't buy raw. That's kind of my rule.
Mhm.
I'll tell you my thought process and I'll give you,
Okay.
there's a counterpoint, but my thought process is anything before 2016 or 2017 that is in gradable condition will be graded.
Agreed.
We live in we're working in a market that it's the PSA 10s and 9.5s and even the nines for thicker cards that garner real upside when it comes to money. So I think you need to at least if you're buying it for yourself and you like the card, like a lot of these thicker cards are they have an autograph or they just look good, they have a patch of the jersey. So if it's cracked or if there's small chips in it or if the edges are not sharp, buy it because it's your card, you're keeping it. But if you're buying it with the idea to sell it when this player is hot, I would caution and I would say there's so many people that will not buy raw cards and will ask you for 50 photos. You might send them the photos and then they still might try to return the card if it's not in the condition they want. So I think just knowing what you're buying it for and then I really would steer people away from buying raw cards if it's, before 5 years ago. There's people selling like rookie LeBrons that are in raw condition and I really unless it's like someone's selling an estate and they haven't touched those cards for 10 years, I think you're going to be buying stuff that's in worse condition than you may think.
Yeah. I mean, I always give the advice of why you got to think why is this in raw condition? If you're buying, excuse me, if you're buying like a Cam Reddish card, it's totally plausible to me that someone, even with the prism, pulled the prism out of a pack, got a Cam Reddish, was like, okay, I'll just sell this. I want to be able to buy more packs. It's like, yeah, that could very well be in good condition. But like you said, with these older cards, even like a nice Luca, why would that be in raw condition? That's something I would stay away from. But in terms of buying raw cards, if there's like an opportunity, right? So he said it's a good deal. Maybe it's let's just say a $200 card in a PSA 9. Maybe with the seller disclosing the issue, he can get it for $50 or something like that. So maybe there's an opportunity there, especially if you have limited capital. But for me, I got rid of all my raw cards that weren't in gradable condition, just because it's kind of like scary for me to hold. And unfortunately, quick PSA, if you're buying raw on eBay and it comes and it's not a 10, that doesn't mean you return it. Like that's not how it works. So I bought some cards and I looked at it and it's just small little whitening on the corners or stuff like that, but it's not a 10. And
Yeah.
that's just your card then. So
Yeah.
and I disclosed it, but I got rid of them. It's just you don't, especially with how eBay returns and everything is. Someone wanted to return a Trey Young. I'm just like, man, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Like
Yeah. You're like,
it's
fuck it, I'll take
hard.
it back. Then you got to relist it. I think when you
Yeah,
said quick
you got to
PSA, it's
pay
kind
for
of funny.
shipping.
Yeah, pun intended. Usually PSA is not that quick.
Yeah.
So it's funny you say that, but I think you went into it pretty gung ho about raw cards, and I'm not saying that like to put you on blast. I'm saying that because you got to where you are now from your own experiences, and that's how everyone is. I also bought like a lot of 50 or 100 cards that are raw, and the time that it takes to get it graded. This may be different in a year or two, but right now, the time that it takes to get graded, a lot of times these cards have already popped, and I want to sell, and I don't have the card in hand, so I can't sell it, and it comes back, and a lot of times you're disappointed with the grade. So I think if you're locating someone because you think they're underpriced and there's a money making opportunity, then I would challenge people to pony up and buy a card that's graded. If it's for your own personal collection, fuck it. Some people like stuff that's not slabbed. So I think that it's more power to you if you're going to buy the card for yourself. But if you're buying it with your investor hat on, then I would caution people.
Yeah, I guess to answer his question, there are opportunities to be had with raw cards. And this is actually exactly what you told me when I was buying all my raw cards. You're like, I've made a ton of money off raw cards. I've had good experiences, but you just have to know, first of all, even if it's in good condition, that PSA turnaround time right now is brutal. And I'm learning that myself. And even let's just say you buy, I don't know, a Joel Embiid RPA. If it's in raw condition and it's not in gradable condition, you can still flip it for double your money. So maybe if the right opportunity is there, I'd have to look at the question again. But if you really found a great opportunity on an RPA and it's raw but not gradable, yeah, maybe I'm sure there's a price where you should take it. But especially for the newer people, just know the danger of playing in the raw card waters, because it's a lot tougher than graded, especially with the eBay returns and everything.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, I think that's it for the episode today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Once again, if you enjoyed, please subscribe. We're going to be keeping this coming every week. We're also Spotify and Apple. It's not there yet. Don't go running yet, but we are going to get it on there hopefully within the next week. So definitely stay tuned for that. We have a lot of cool stuff coming. But yeah, that's it for today.
Super excited. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Troy and I have a lot of fun with this. We're not making any money or looking at it for anything other than fun. I think it's cool that we have a small following, and let's keep coming back. We're gonna keep giving you guys good content and some nice giveaway stuff. I have cards that are going to be probably in the 200 and up range that we're going to be doing giveaways. So keep coming back if you like the content.
Well, we're not making any money from the actual podcast, but our pump and dump schemes have been
great. Spot on. Thousands, hundreds. Thousands.
Watch out for all our James Hardens and Kevin Durant's hitting the market.
Hitting the market right now.
Yep, exactly. eBay. But all right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Troy, thanks for having me.